Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talkin' Tunes with Dr. Tony. Technically, this is episode 26, but as you can see in the title, this will be my last video, at least for the foreseeable future. So, no, this isn't clickbait. Last video. It's not like bands that they promote themselves as having their farewell concert and then 20 years later they're still playing. I remember when I was a kid growing up in Bell, California, I was collecting stamps. And there was a company selling stamps, and in the window they had a sign that said going out of business sale. And that sign was in that window for so long that the sun faded it. So they never went out of business. So they were really trying to encourage people to come in and buy stamps. So, but quite honestly, this will be my last video. So some of you may be wondering, well, why is he stopping? Well, if you go back and watch my first video, which I believed I did in December, the purpose of the videos were to encourage dialogue about music. And I was trying to foster some interaction between the music community, especially people that had similar interests as myself. Well, to this date, I have 62 subscribers, and there's quite a few views, but very, very few people comment. And I'm really not sure what level of enjoyment people are getting from the videos. It's hard to assess that from the comments. The level of engagement looks pretty low. So the purpose of the videos really has not been met. And yeah, I enjoy preparing the videos and sharing them with you, but I'm primarily doing them to encourage other people to interact with myself and with each other. And that's not really happening. So I'm going to call it a day, but I do have an alternative for some of you that want to continue not watching videos, but maybe interacting with myself and with each other. So I'll share that with you at the end of this video. So this video is going to be fairly free form, and it puts me in mind of one of my favorite, if not my very favorite radio shows of all time. And this was a show hosted by a guy named Elliot Mintz on KPCC radio from Pasadena City College. And Elliot came on the scene in 1967, and I started listening to it probably around 68, 69, and was broadcast on Sunday night from 8 to 12. And Elliot pretty much talked about whatever he felt like talking about. Excuse me while I have a sip of wine here. I'm basically celebrating this last show. So Elliot would start off the show. His theme song was Let's Spend the Night Together by the Rolling Stones. And this show was amazing. This is where I first heard Frank Zappa. It was from the Fillmore East concert. It was What Kind of Girls, or What Kind of Girl Do You Think We Are? And also he had Baba Ramdas on that show, whose original name was Richard Alpert. And he was a colleague of Timothy Leary at Harvard. So he talked a lot about his journey involving psychotropic drugs. And then later on, he became involved with East Indian religion and beliefs. So it was a great show. And I don't know if those shows are archived anywhere. But so anyway, I'm going to be kind of following in Elliot's footsteps tonight on this video. It's a Sunday night here in Georgia, and just talk about a few different things. And then I have a lot of top 10 list. If you recall one of my earlier videos, I talked about which artist populated my library to the highest extent, but that didn't necessarily mean that they were my favorites. Well, tonight I am going to share with you my favorites, my favorite concerts, my favorite albums, my favorite artist, my favorite male and female vocalist, my favorite guitar player, and then also my favorite unheralded bands that really are not that popular and really haven't gotten the attention they deserve. So that's what we're going to do. So maybe we'll start off by talking about my top 10 artists, and I'm going to basically do a countdown from 10 to 1. I'll be working from a list. So let me just put my glasses on so I can read, and I'll tell you my top 10 bands or artists starting with number 10. And then I'll talk a little bit about each one of them. So number 10 is Stevie Wonder. And as I mentioned before, Stevie Wonder had a run of 5 consecutive albums that were fantastic, starting off with Music of My Mind and ending up with Songs in the Key of Life. And those were just amazing albums. He did a lot of interesting things before that, especially when he was Little Stevie Wonder. And then after that, only a few albums sporadically, and then he stopped recording in 2005. But Stevie is one of my favorites. Number 9 is John Hyatt. So I've seen John Hyatt in concert probably a dozen times, and John is just slightly older than me. I first discovered him when he was being touted as the California Elvis Costello. And his first few albums, his producers really didn't know what to do with him. And he developed a substance abuse problem, and his wife ended up committing suicide, I believe. So he moved back to Nashville with his daughter, Georgia Ray, and set up headquarters there, then came back to LA and recorded Bring the Family with Ry Cooder, Jim Keltner, and Nick Lowe. And that was his breakthrough album. And after that, he did a lot of great albums. So John Hyatt, I think he personifies Americana because he can do practically any type of music, and he does it very, very well. Number 8 is Steely Dan. Steely Dan. So they are the quintessential studio band. I've intentionally avoided seeing Steely Dan live just because I don't think that they could measure up to my expectations from their studio sound. But they're just an amazing group, and they just did a good string of albums. I'm not that big of a fan of Can't Buy a Thrill, their first album, but starting with Countdown to Ecstasy and Everything Must Go, those albums are definitely worthwhile. If you want to audition a stereo system, Steely Dan is the group to use, and you can't go wrong with using the Asia album as your test case record. Number 7 is Joni Mitchell. Joni Mitchell. So my favorite female artist, without a doubt. Joni could have kept making Court and Spark forever and would have cleaned up financially, but the royalties from that album set her up financially for life. So Joni went into some really different directions with jazz type music and later some rock, and she pretty much was her own person. She really never sold out, and unfortunately Joni's career has came to a standstill in the 21st century, where she only really did one studio album called Shine, and her voice is not what it used to be for a variety of reasons, but Joni's work is fantastic, so love her to death. Number 6 is XTC. So XTC, like one of my favorite artists, Harry Nilsson, did not really do a lot of concerts. Andy Partridge, the main guy, got stage fright, and they quit touring in the 80s. But they made so many wonderful albums. My favorites are Skylarking, Oranges and Lemons. And I characterize their music as kind of a combination of the Beatles, English folk music, and punk. And to my ears, XTC had never had one song that sounded like another. So they're very diversified and one of my very favorite bands. Number 5, the Beach Boys. Okay, the Beach Boys. So, as you recall, I have more Beach Boys recordings in my library than anything. And the Beach Boys, you know, growing up in Southern California, they were part of the landscape, but I got into them in a big way, starting probably with the Holland album and then Surf's Up. And then I went back and got into Pet Sounds and Summer Days and Summer Nights and pretty much everything they've done. I love That's Why God Made the Radio from a few years ago. Mike Love was kind of bitter about that album because he didn't have a lot of involvement with it, but maybe that's what made it really great. But yeah, the Beach Boys, as you'll see when I get to my favorite songs, they have 2 of my top 10 songs. So the Beach Boys, number 5. Number 4, Frank Zappa. Okay, as you probably know, if you've seen some of my former videos, I'm a big Zappa fan, and there's no one like him. And I would say he's probably the genius of our generation. No one compares to Frank Zappa. He released over 100 albums in his lifetime. Nobody did that. And then 100 albums released posthumously. No one's done that. So, you know, if you only know Frank Zappa from his novelty songs, like Disco Boy, Valley Girl, Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, you owe it to yourself to go in and check out his records. And you can go to Spotify and pretty much listen to them all. So, great guitar player, great composer, great satirist, just all around genius. So Frank Zappa, number 4. Number 3 is Genesis. Now, when I say Genesis, you probably know that I'm talking about the Peter Gabriel, Steve Hackett Genesis. That band ceased to exist once Steve Hackett left, but during the time starting with Nursery Crime and going all the way to Wind and Wuthering, you can't beat Genesis. I mean, they're amazing. Very, very great prog rock band, and just love them to death. I got into them at the very beginning and stayed with them until I couldn't listen to them anymore because it became the Phil Collins hour. Okay, number 2. Number 2 and number 1. Hard to come up with, but number 2 is The Who. The Who. So got into The Who when I saw the Monterey Jazz Pop Festival movie. And no, I'm sorry, not Monterey. Woodstock. That did it for me. And so as a live band, studio band, I tell people that any group that could have done either Tommy, Who's Next, Quadrophenia, just one of those would have been enough. But here's a band that did that trifecta, and they also did Who Sell Out before, and then they did Who Are You, The Who by Numbers, and It's Hard, and Face Dances, I think it is, yeah. So The Who, number 2, and number 1, Yes. So to me, Yes is a little bit better than Genesis because I prefer Steve Howe's guitar playing. I think their production is a little bit better. Their songwriting is a little bit better. Bass playing, Chris Squire, phenomenal. Brill Bruford drumming, amazing. Rick Wakeman, amazing. So love Yes. Saw them the first time opening for 10 Years After. And I was behind the stage. You may have heard me tell the story, but I thought that Rick Wakeman and John Anderson were both female because I couldn't see their faces. And they had long hair. John Anderson's voice was very high. But huge Yes fan, and they're continuing to grind it out. They just released a new album recently, and Steve Howe is the only mainstay. He's not an original member, but he was there beginning with their 3rd album. So, yeah, Yes is number 1. Okay, now, I got an honorable mention at number 11. and it's 10cc. So I read a review of 10cc when they first came out, and they described them as Frank Zappa meets the Beach Boys. So of course I had to buy their first record, and I stayed with them for their first 4 records: 10cc, sheet music, original soundtrack, How Dare You. And then after that, Godley and Cream left. Deceptive Benz was pretty good with Graham Gouldman and Eric Stewart, but then they increasingly became more and more commercial. But those first 4 to 5 albums, you can't go wrong. So there you have it, my top groups. Now, let's go in and talk about my top 10 albums. 10 albums. So number 10 is Blow by Blow, Jeff Beck. Probably the ultimate jazz fusion record. Produced by George Martin. Again, great sounding record. All instrumental except She's a Woman, where Jeff is singing through that contraption like Peter Frampton uses. But just fantastic, fantastic record. So if you like jazz fusion, you haven't heard Blow by Blow, that's a great one to get. Number 9, Forever Changes by the band Love. So Love was the house band at the Whiskey before the Doors, and they're one of the first biracial groups. Arthur Lee, the lead singer, walked from Dorsey High School or Manual Arts to the Capitol Record Building and wanted to be signed. So Arthur Lee was the mainstay, but the Forever Changes album has Again Together, or I think Alone Together, or can't remember the name of it, but that is a fantastic album. They did a few other great records, but again, love that record, Forever Changes. Number 8 is Child is Father to the Man. A lot of people don't know this record, but it's the first Blood, Sweat, and Tears album. So Al Kooper left Blues Project, along with Steve Katz on guitar, and formed Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And that first album has I Can't Quit Her, and it's really a great psychedelic horn pop album. He also does a cover of Harry Nilsson's Without Her. So I highly recommend that you listen to Child is Father to the Man. It has a great cover where the band members have puppets of themselves sitting on their knee. Number 7, Traffic's album called Traffic. Has the 4 of them on the cover. So Dave Mason and Steve Winwood alternate tracks. And Dave Mason is fantastic. One of the few times that he really had a lot of impact on a Traffic record. And it's really, really great. And to my ears, that album does not age. Jimmy Miller produced it, who produced a lot of the Rolling Stones albums. The sound quality is pretty good for a 1967 recording. It's got Pretty Queen, it's got 40,000 Headmen, it's got Vagabond Virgin, Crying to Be Heard, No Time to Live, Feeling All Right. I mean, it's almost like a greatest hits, but it's an amazing, amazing album. I think Steve Winwood was probably around 19 years old on that record. All right, number 6, number 1 record by Big Star. Big Star. So Big Star is the greatest band that never was. They had 3 records, all the Rolling Stone Top 500. Number 1 record was their first record. And it has so many wonderful pop songs with Chris Bell and Alex Chilton alternating on lead vocals, guitar. They just were, they came around at the wrong time. And had they come around a little earlier, a little later, they would have been one of the best bands of all time. But unfortunately, they didn't make it. And they have a DVD, No One Can Hurt Me, which is the Big Star story. If you've not seen it, you owe it to yourself to watch it because it'll make you cry. Very sad story, very sad. Number 5 is Chicago 2, Chicago 2, also just called Chicago. So they were enjoined from using the Chicago Transit Authority name after the first album, so they became Chicago, and the second album is just called Chicago, but it's really Chicago 2. Side 2 is fantastic. So Fancy Colors, Wake Up Sunshine opens, and then there's a whole suite for A Girl from Buchanan, Make Me Smile, Color My World's on there. It's an amazing album. It's better than the first album, in my opinion. The first album is great, but the second album is where they peaked. Definitely Terry Kath's band, wonderful guitar player, but 3 great vocalists. Check it out if you've not heard it. All 4 sides are really, really good. All right, number 4, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Okay, David Bowie's masterpiece. Every song is great from start to finish. Side 2 trumps side 1, but just a fantastic record, and I got to see him in concert during this album. So Ziggy Stardust, you can't beat it. Never get tired of hearing it. Can hear it over and over again. Wonderful record. Number 3 is Wish You Were Here. My favorite Pink Floyd album. My only Pink Floyd album in this top 10. Dark Side of the Moon. Nothing to be said about that. Shine On You Crazy Diamond, and Welcome to the Machine. Amazing. And other good albums too. Animals is underappreciated. Metal, great album. But for me, it's Wish You Were Here. Love the cover. Hypnosis does the cover. Great guitar playing. Just amazing album. Wish You Were Here. Number 2 is Fragile. Fragile. So I beg to differ with most Yes fans who pick Close to the Edge as their favorite album. To me, it's Fragile. And I've talked about this before, but I'll mention it again. So it opens up with a hit, Roundabout. Side 2, Long Distance Runaround. So these are great singles. Then Heart of the Sunrise, amazing epic. And then at the end of side 1, can never remember the name of that song. So maybe I'll have another sip of wine and it'll come to me. But you know what the song is. Maybe I'll just superimpose it on the video. And then there's 4 songs that each member, or 5 songs that each member gets to do. Mood for a Day and things like that. So I think the album is really well balanced. Close to the Edge for me is great too, but I'd rather have more songs. But Siberian Khatru on Close to the Edge, to me, is my second favorite song, second only to Heart of the Sunrise. Okay, number 1 has to be Abbey Road. I mean, that album is flawless. And like some other albums, like Ziggy Stardust, side 2 of Abbey Road is where it's happening, especially beginning with You Never Give Me Your Money, all the way to Your Majesty. So there you have it, the top 10 albums. All right, so let's segue a little bit and talk about my top 10 guitar players. Top 10. So number 10 is Alan Holdsworth. So Alan Holdsworth is not a household name, but he was in a lot of different groups. He played with the UK, and Alan moved to Vista, California near the latter part of his life, but fantastic guitar player. So he's not my number 10. Number 9 is Mick Taylor. Mick Taylor. So I have the English blues rock guitar players, Mick Taylor, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, and Peter Green. But I put Mick Taylor right there. So his work with the Rolling Stones was great. His work with John Mayall was great. And then he also had 2 solo albums, which were really good. I had a chance to see him solo in a small club, really good. So Mick Taylor is my number 9. Number 8, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Maybe one of the great blues guitarists of all time, and his life was cut short way too soon. He was just getting in the groove, coming off of an addiction problem, and I think he could have done a lot, but at least he left us with the last album, In Step. It had Riviera Paradise, which closed it. Great album, great guitar player, great blues, great singer. So Stevie Ray Vaughan, number 8. Number 7, Mike Bloomfield from Chicago. So started off with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, went to the Electric Flag, played with Al Kooper on Super Session, the live adventures of Mike Bloomfield and Al Kooper, did some solo stuff, died young of a heroin overdose, but like Stevie Ray, the 2 of them may be the great white blues guitar players of all time. So Mike Bloomfield, to me, he's kind of like a more technically proficient B.B. King. So that's my rendition of Mike Bloomfield. Number 6 is, can't even read my own writing, Steve Howe. Steve Howe, okay. Love Steve Howe. Saw Yes a few years ago, right before Chris Squire passed away, and they were really tired, but Steve Howe still had a lot of energy, and I think he's a very inventive guitar player. When he joined Yes for the Yes album, he gave it a shot in the arm, which they needed, and then his guitar playing has been amazing all along there. You know, it's funny, he's on that album, GTR, and also played, I think, on Asia, and his guitar playing is almost non-existent. I don't know what happened, but when given a chance to play, Steve Howe is right there at the top. Okay, number 5 is Jan Ackerman from Focus. Again, an unsung guitar hero. Can play pretty much anything. I had a solo album where most of it was playing classical madrigal music on lute, all acoustic. But his electric guitar playing is really, really great. And you will know more about that when I get to one of my all-time live albums. So Jan Ackerman from the Netherlands, number 5. Number 4, Larry Coryell. Larry Coryell, so jazz fusion guitar player, straight ahead jazz guitarist, was in the start of the 11th House, which was one of the early jazz fusion bands, along with Weather Report and Return to Forever and Mahavishnu, although they didn't get the attention as those 3 bands. Larry could play great acoustic guitar, so passed away a few years back, but great guitar player, so that's my number 4, Larry Coryell. Number 3 is Terry Kath from Chicago. Jimi Hendrix called Terry Kath his favorite guitar player ever. He was the best. And Terry was definitely great in those early Chicago albums. Died of playing Russian roulette, I guess, or I don't know. He shot himself in the head inadvertently. And after that, Chicago pretty much became the Peter Cetera show. In my opinion, they took a turn for the worse, but they made a lot of money. Number 2, Jeff Beck. Already talked about him on Blow by Blow. Passed away recently. And number 1 is John McLaughlin. Okay, so John McLaughlin is my number 1 because technically he's amazing and he also has a lot of ideas. And he's very fast. So he's up there. Now, I have to have an honorable mention here, Frank Zappa, okay? Frank, again, it didn't start off as a guitar hero, but later on definitely became one and has many, many wonderful solos. So there you have it, my top guitarist. All right, let's go now to my top male vocalist. And I have 10. So some of them you know, because I talked about my top one recently. But number 10 is Van Morrison, okay? Van has made so many albums, and he's one of the few singers that can sing nonsense, just kind of growling and guttural noises, and sounds so cool. So Van Morrison is my number 10. Great soul vocalist, great R&B, great Celtic, great all around. Number 9, Aaron Neville. A lot of people don't like Aaron Neville. Aaron Neville is a acquired taste. So he sounds nothing like what he looks, but just has a beautiful, beautiful voice and can sing a lot of different types of songs with the Neville Brothers, with his collaborations, and also his solo stuff. Okay, number 8 is Randy Travis. Okay, my favorite country vocalist, and you probably know that Randy can't sing anymore, so he's out of commission, but he's a great vocalist. Number 7, Paul McCartney. Can't beat him. I mean, what can you say about Paul McCartney other than he's a wonderful vocalist? Number 6, Roy Orbison. Again, an amazing vocalist that died very young, but did a lot of great solo stuff, and also with the Traveling Wilburys. Then we have somebody that you may not have heard of, Willie DeVille from the band Mink DeVille. So if you've not heard them, I highly recommend that you check them out, because you won't be sorry. They are a great band, and he died very young of drug-related illness. Number 4 is Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury's got to be in anybody's top 10 list. A lot of people have him as number 1, but he's not my favorite, so he's number 4. Number 3, Burton Cummings from the Guess Who. Fantastic vocalist. Great screamer with good quality of his screaming. Wonderful ballad singer. Sang all the Guess Who hits, and they had many of them. So he's my number 3. Number 2, Glenn Tilbrook from Squeeze. Again, this could come as a surprise, but he is an amazing vocalist. I've seen Squeeze in concert a number of times, and I've seen Glenn solo. He never fails to please. And then number 1, as I mentioned in my last video, is Harry Nilsson. So you can see my shirt, recently purchased. I've been enjoying listening to all of Nilsson's recordings for RCA, and if you haven't checked him out, he was as much of a consummate artist as you could find in terms of his voice, his songwriting, his arranging, his lyrics, the whole thing. Harry Nilsson, number 1. All right, so let's keep going. I want to talk about now my top live albums, and I only have 5 of them, so there weren't 10. So number 5 is Live Rust by Neil Young. If you haven't heard it, it's a great one, so I highly encourage you to check that out. Number 4 is Little Feat, Waiting for Columbus. Underrated live album, great quality, Little Feat in their prime. Number 3 is Focus, Live at the Rainbow. If you want to hear Focus in their prime, and Jan Ackerman, that's the one to go for. Number 2, the Allman Brothers, Live at the Fillmore East. Great album, great slide guitar playing. And then is number 1, Live at Leeds by The Who. The Who at their heaviest. I kind of hurriedly rushed through those last two albums, the live album. So the Allman Brothers Live at the Fillmore East was their breakout album. Before that, they had a couple studio albums, and they really weren't selling. When they had that live album, they just took off. So I think the interplay between Duane Allman and Dickie Betts is unrivaled. Dickie Betts really needed Duane Allman to bring out the best in him. But Duane primarily plays slide the whole album, the whole concert. And I've never heard anybody play slide guitar like he does. So that's great. Now, Live at Leeds. Okay. So a lot of people talk about Led Zeppelin and other classic bands, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, being heavy. Well, The Who were as heavy as those bands, but they did it with a lot more style and grace because they were playing songs from their studio recordings, like from Tommy, which weren't really all that heavy. But when they played them live, they took on a new identity, but they still retained their song structure. And John Entwistle's bass playing is fantastic. That to me, they nailed it. So Live at Leeds is the best live album ever. And if you play it on your stereo and you turn it up loud, you will be right back there in 1970 with The Who, or 69. All right, so let's go to, speaking of concerts, let's go to my top 10 concerts. And I'm going to count them down in order. So the first one was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And this was 1977 at the Whiskey A Go-Go. This was Tom Petty's breakout year. And when I saw him there in that small venue, I knew that he was going to be something special. And he was. I mean, it was a really, really great show. So Tom Petty at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Hollywood, number 10, 1977. Number 9, the band at the Greek Theater. This was the original band nearing the end of their career before Robbie Robertson left and Richard Manuel died. So if you've ever seen the band in The Last Waltz, or if you have the Rock of Ages double live album, you know what they were like live. So seeing them live at the Greek Theater was amazing. They opened up Don't Do It, Don't You Break My Heart. Really good opener. And then they played a lot of stuff off of Northern Lights and Southern Cross and from their old catalog. And they were just fantastic. So very memorable concert. All right, number 8 is Return to Forever. And this was a 21st century concert from 2008 at the Cobb Energy Center in Cobb County, Georgia. So this was the original Return to Forever. Al Di Meola, Lenny White, Stanley Clarke, Chick Corea. And the first half of the show was acoustic, and then they took a break, and then they came and they played electric. And I got to tell you, they had not played together, I think, in like 20 years. They didn't miss a beat. They were still so tight, and that was a fantastic show. So Return to Forever, 2008. Number 7, Peter Gabriel from the Inglewood Forum, 1986. So Peter Gabriel and David Byrne from Talking Heads were both similar because they both are live wires on stage. And Peter Gabriel, he didn't do any Genesis songs at all, but I think he had 3 albums out, or maybe 4. He did Biko. When he was singing Biko, the whole forum, everybody was chanting along with him, and he was just amazing. So Peter Gabriel at the Forum, 1986. That's number 7. Number 6, Emerson, Lake and Palmer and the Mahavishnu Orchestra opening at the old Long Beach Auditorium, now torn down, and the Long Beach Terrace Theater has replaced it. So I didn't know anything about the Mahavishnu Orchestra. I went for Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They were fantastic. And Emerson, Lake and Palmer, of course, really great. I tell people that Keith Emerson and Carl Palmer, just the two of them, could do a concert by themselves. Greg Lake added something, nice vocalist, pretty good bass player, but the two of those guys could have carried it off on their own. Okay, my number 5 favorite concert were the Mothers of Invention at the Hollywood Palladium from 1973. This is when they had the Overnight Sensation album, and it was just my first exposure to Frank Zappa live. And one of the most interesting things at that concert is they played a song and they switched instruments one by one until at the end of the song they were all playing a different instrument than they were playing at the beginning of the song, but the song had never changed. So I think Zappa was probably the only person ever to do that. And also there were no encores. He said, let's pretend that we went up the stage and you clapped and we came back. We're not going to do that. So this is our last song. And that was it. So that was really a fantastic show. Number 4, Pink Floyd at the Hollywood Bowl, 1972. So they opened with Echoes from the Metal album, and then they played The Dark Side of the Moon all the way through with a fantastic quadraphonic stereo system, or actually quadraphonic system, not stereo. And I remember the song Brain Damage, The Lunatic is in My Head. You could hear that laughter coming from the far back left of the Hollywood Bowl. They also had a fireworks show. So that was the only time I ever saw Pink Floyd, but I can't imagine that they were any better at any other concert. Number 3 was Bruce Springsteen at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, 1976. This is when Born to Run came out. And I got a ticket to the show. I was actually reluctant to go because Bruce Springsteen had been hyped a lot as the new Dylan. But I went anyway, and I'm glad I did because it was really, really a great concert. They played every song from Born to Run except for Meeting Across the River, because that was an acoustic cut with a stand-up bass and a acoustic guitar, I believe. But Bruce Springsteen was really good, and it was almost as if he was just so thankful to be able to perform live. He was very humble, and the crowd was up for the entire show, so it was really, really great. Number 2 were Genesis at the Roxy, 1973. I believe this was their first show in Los Angeles. So actually, in Los Angeles, and they played a lot of the songs off of Nursery Crime and Foxtrot. Peter Gabriel was the only one who stood for the concert. And I remember I had the Foxtrot album. I only listened to one side 1. I never even listened to Supper's Ready, which may be the greatest prog song ever. And I went there to see the first show, which I think started around 9 o'clock, and it was sold out. So I had to wait in line for the next show, which started at midnight. Went in there pretty tired, but it was a very exhilarating show and really made me become a Genesis fan for life. So, number 1, The Who at the Long Beach Arena, 1971. So, this concert I saw shortly after watching the Woodstock movie, and The Who were primarily playing songs off of Who's Next. They opened up with I Can't Explain and Substitute, which they did so very often during their early concert years. But it was just a really, really great show. I got to see them after that do Quadrophenia live at the Forum twice. And then I saw them do a lot of songs from Tommy at the Anaheim Convention Center. So those are my top 10 concerts. Let's move on and talk about my top 10 female vocalists. So number 10 is Adele. Had to put Adele in there just because of the quality of her voice. I'm not really that big of a fan of her songs. Maybe I need to listen a little bit more, but I know that she is very, very popular. She just did a residency in Las Vegas a couple months back. So she's my number 10. Number 9, sorry, is Dinah Washington. Dinah Washington is not really that well known to most people, but she, along with her contemporary jazz singers, was really great. So number 9. Number 8 is Sarah Vaughan. Sarah Vaughan, great singer, immediately identifiable voice. Love Sarah Vaughan. Number 7, Diane Shore. Again, someone that you may not know. My uncle turned me on to Diane Shore. She was playing in some small hotel clubs in Tucson, Arizona, and she ended up recording an album with the Count Basie Orchestra and did many, many solo albums. So Diane Shore, great vocalist. One of my favorite songs of all time is Louisiana Sunday Afternoon. It didn't make my top 10 list, but it's certainly a song that I can listen to over and over again. She also has covered a couple of Ray Charles songs. If you want to get a great album, get the album called Talkin' About You. Okay, number 6, Annie Lennox. Annie Lennox. So you probably know Annie Lennox from the Eurythmics. She also did some songs with Aretha Franklin. The sisters are doing it for themselves. She's done No More I Love Yous, which is a great song. She also did Don't Let It Bring You Down by Neil Young. So Annie Lennox definitely has a distinctive voice, and she's in my top 10 at number 6. Number 5 is Karen Carpenter. So Karen Carpenter was from my wife's hometown of Downey, California. My wife's 2 older brothers went to high school with Karen and with her brother Richard Carpenter. And you know the Karen Carpenter story, died much too young, but so many good songs. Rainy Days and Mondays, Always Get Me Down, Superstar, Close to You, We've Only Just Begun, so many others. And it's interesting that she started off just as the drummer in the band and slowly became the lead vocalist, and just has a great sultry, low voice. Never get tired of Karen Carpenter. Number 4, Joni Mitchell. So Joni Mitchell is there. She's one of my favorite artists and also one of my favorite vocalists. And unfortunately, Joni's voice has failed her. She's not singing anymore, and over the years, her voice started to deteriorate. Number 3, in a similar situation, Linda Ronstadt, who has Parkinson's and cannot sing at all anymore. But while she was singing, Linda pretty much covered the whole gamut, from country rock, from the standards she did with the Nelson Riddle Orchestra, also just the ballads, the duets she sang with Aaron Neville. Also, she did a couple albums in the Mexican language, Spanish. So Linda Ronstadt, really great vocalist. Number 2, Aretha Franklin. If you want to see how Aretha got her breakthrough, check out the movie Muscle Shoals. Aretha was originally signed to Columbia, and they were trying to make her like a torch singer, singing with orchestras, and it wasn't working, so they released her. And Atlantic Record picked her up, and Jerry Wexler said, I need you to go down to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, because the guys there play greasy. So she went down, and it took a little while for her to get started in the first session, but ended up doing I Never Loved Another Man the Way I Love You, and that was a great song for her. But after that, she left the next day, but she continued to record with the Swampers, the band from Muscle Shoals, and they played on all of her big songs. Chain of Fools, all the songs that you know about from Aretha, those guys played on. And then my number one, as you probably know from a previous video, is Ella Fitzgerald. Ella sang from, boy, the 30s all the way up until the 70s, 80s. Very underappreciated vocalist, but such a beautiful tone and just very, very diversified. She could do a lot more than just scat singing. So those are my top 10 female vocalists. Let's go on to my top 10 songs. So number 10 is a song by Mark Broussard about Georgia. So you may know Georgia on My Mind by Ray Charles, Rainy Night in Georgia, Brooke Benton originally recorded it, and then Midnight Train to Georgia, Gladys Knight and the Pips. Well, Mark Broussard has Lonely Night in Georgia. And he wrote and recorded the song because he missed his family while he was touring. He tours quite a bit. So if you want to hear a great ballad about Georgia, or just a great ballad in general, that's it. Number 9, Hank Williams, I Can't Help It If I'm Still in Love with You. Possibly the greatest country song ever written and sang. George Jones had a couple that rival that, but this one does it for me. Great lyrics. I Can't Help It If I'm Still in Love with You. Number 8 is On the Way Home by Buffalo Springfield. So this song was written by Neil Young, but during this time he really didn't have a lot of confidence in his voice. So he had Richie Furay sing it. And it's a really great song, great harmonies. Never get tired of hearing it. So that's my number 8. My number 7 is a song from Squeeze called It's Over. Love that song. There's so many great songs by Squeeze, but this one I love because of the opening. Hey, wait a minute, something's wrong. And that's how it goes, and or something's not right, I think it is. But the song has 3 different sections to it that are very different from each other, but you can really appreciate Glenn Tilbrook's voice on It's Over. Number 6, the song Cellophane by the Wondermints. So this is from an album called Bali, and has a really, really great bass part in it and also keyboards. So if you want to check out a song that maybe you've never heard, Cellophane by the Wondermints, really great. Number 5 is Cabanescence by the Beach Boys. This is originally, I believe, recorded for the Smile album, but was subsequently released on a later Beach Boys album. Not that well known, but fantastic melody, great singing. You can't go wrong listening to Cabanescence, 2 words. Number 4, Visions by Stevie Wonder. So this is off the Inner Visions album. It's a ballad. I think Stevie, even though he does great all-around type songs, his ballads are my favorites. And this has an acoustic bass and a jazz guitar, and just really, really a good song. So check out Visions. Number 4. Number 3 is Flying on the Ground is Wrong. Now again, this is probably a relatively obscure song for you, by Buffalo Springfield. Same situation as On the Way Home. Written by Neil Young, sung by Richie Furay. Really, really good song, so check that one out. Number 2 is I Guess the Lord Must Be in New York City, not live in New York City. So Harry Nilsson, he wrote this song for Midnight Cowboy. It was rejected, but nevertheless, wonderful song. Has a really nice banjo part in it, and the lyrics are fantastic. And then number 1 is the song Surf's Up by the Beach Boys. So again, written for the Smile session. There's a great YouTube video that shows Brian Wilson singing Surf's Up and playing piano. That's it, piano in his voice. But there's also a really good version of it on the Tribute to Brian Wilson DVD concert that has Vince Gill, Jimmy Webb, and David Crosby, the three of them singing it. And Vince Gill just kills it. His voice is so high, and just like Brian Wilson, but I think Vince Gill's voice is probably the best I've ever heard on Surf's Up. So that's my top 10 songs. So all we have left are my top 10 underappreciated groups. So let's just go through those real quickly. Number 10 are the Wondermints. So the Wondermints were basically recruited by Brian Wilson to be his touring band, and they're still with him. But they had 3 or 4 albums, I believe. One album is all cover songs. That's really, really good. It's got the Monkees. It's got the Hudson Brothers on there. It's got Pink Floyd. So I really encourage you to check out that album, and you would enjoy it quite a bit. Number 9 is Dada, Dada. Again, a band you may have never heard. Their best album is Puzzle. I saw them in concert. They're a 3-piece group, but boy, do they really have a great sound, and their guitar player, who's also one of the lead singers, is really, really good. Number 8 is Caravan. So Caravan is an English band from the Canterbury scene, and they have a couple really good albums, actually 3, from the Land of Grey and Pink, probably their best well-known album. They also have one called Waterloo Lily, another one called Cunning Stunts, and they're a really good band, kind of a second-tier prog band, but I think you would enjoy that. Number 7 are the High Llamas. High Llamas, another British band. If you ever need to listen to some background music while you're doing some work, you can't go wrong with the High Llamas. Mostly instrumental. The vocals are kind of okay. Sean O'Hagan is kind of the main person of the band. I saw them in concert at the Troubadour, and they were not that good live, but studio, really, really good, and they've put out probably about, 15 albums now. Okay, number 6, Crack the Sky. Crack the Sky. They're a really good band. I think they're from Cleveland, and they had 3, 4 albums. So if you want to hear something really innovative and very good and different, I recommend Crack the Sky. Number 5, Big Star. Big Star. So you've already heard from Big Star, #1 record. Their second album is called Radio City. That was without Chris Bell. Their third album has a couple different names, Thirds or Sister Sister, I think, something along those lines. But the third album is not all that good, but still, all 3 albums in the Rolling Stone Top 500, so check out Big Star. Number 4, Los Lobos. Los Lobos, you probably know them from La Bamba. They've done so much more, like John Hyatt. They are Americana music, and they've done so many different types of songs, electronic music, country western. They've covered Grateful Dead, Bertha, I think it is. They can do all kinds of music, so I highly recommend Los Lobos as an underrated band. Number 3 is Graham Parker. So Graham Parker came out at the same time as Elvis Costello and Joe Jackson. Unfortunately, Graham Parker, I think he came out before those 2 guys, but he never really met with any kind of success. But he's had probably 20 albums or so. I saw him in concert a couple times, very recently here in Atlanta. And I think Graham Parker is very, very deserving of your time and attention. Number 2, Camel. So like Caravan came from the Canterbury scene. Camel, their best album for me is Mirage, but they also had the Snow Goose, which is a concept album, all instrumental. They also had Moon Madness. And they had a lot of personnel changes, but I think if you listen to Mirage, You would really, really like that album quite a bit. And my number one unheralded band of all time is Golden Earring. And you may be saying, wait a minute, they're not that unheralded. They did Radar Love. They did a couple other songs that got some radio airplay in the U.S. True, but I think they've had like 25 or 30 albums, and they were a major success in Europe. They're from the Netherlands, so I think that Golden Earring really deserves a lot more attention. So that's what I had for you on my top 10 list, and I wanted to close out by talking about some of my YouTube channels that I watch. So I love Rick Beato's YouTube channel. So it's Beato. You definitely need to check him out. He has so many different types of programming. So he has over 100 videos called What Makes This Song Great, where he breaks down songs. He actually mixes them down and isolates tracks, and then he plays along with them, either guitar or bass or keyboards. He also has done a lot of interviews with people like Ron Carter, with Peter Frampton, with Christopher Cross, Steve Lukather. He's very well connected, so check out Rick Beato. Another one that's really, really good that I've been listening to lately is called Virgin Rock, where there's a classical harp player, a lady, who is now listening to primarily classic rock and then doing some commentary on those, and then actually dissecting them, going to the piano and talking about their time signatures and different aspects of the songs. That's a good one. And then you may recall that I did a video with Shaggy, the opinionated hippie. So he's really good. He's very prolific. Usually does about 3 or 4 videos a week. And he's a big Frank Zappa and Grateful Dead fan, but he also does other things. So 2 other YouTube channels I want to talk about. I'm not going to mention them by name because I'm going to be somewhat critical. There are these 3 young guys, and they have a really popular channel where they do a lot of reviews. But what they'll do is they will criticize bands for their production techniques that they used when they were around in the 80s. And they really need to be looking at the voices, the instrumentation, the arrangement, the song structure, and not to criticize something because they used electronic drums, let's say in the 80s. That has really nothing to do with their longevity. So I really encourage those guys to be a little bit more open-minded when they go back in time and listen to music, and try to be more in the moment and look at things in their proper context. And there's another person that's been around for about 10 years, and this person has many subscribers, but they'll do album critiques on that YouTube channel, and they'll have like maybe 8, 9, 10, 12 people on screen. Looks like the Hollywood Squares, or looks like something out of the Brady Bunch, where they'll be talking about one album, and while one person is talking, the other 11 will just be there saying nothing. And I think that's kind of boring to watch and also boring to do. So I would encourage that person, if someone could contact him, maybe even me, to reconsider how he structures the video. So anyway, that's what I had for you today. Now, to continue on with Dr. Tony, I'm going to be looking into the listening party feature that Spotify has. And if you're a premium member of Spotify, you can stream music to other premium members in real time. So in essence, if someone's in California and I'm in Georgia, I can stream some music to them, and they can listen to it, and they know it's coming from me, and then they could send me a song. So in essence, you're almost together listening to music. But I'm going to take it a step further. I want to use my my subscribed Zoom channel, so that while we're listening to the Spotify music, we can be seeing each other. And if we stop the song, we can then talk about what we just listened to. And I believe as long as I don't record those Zoom sessions, I don't run any risk of any plagiarism or copyright infringement or anything like that. So we will be able to spend time together in real time. And I think maybe doing something like that once a month could be fun. So if you're interested in that, please post a comment at the end of this video. But I also would like to have any comments about those lists that I came up with or anything else about the video. So it's been fun, and who knows what tomorrow may bring. That's off that Traffic album. But my plans are not to do any more videos. I pretty much have shared, I think, everything I wanted to talk about. And I wish you all the very best, good health and good times ahead. And God bless all of you. Talk with you later.